Hello reality artists, this is Paolo and today I am extremely happy to present to you the new features of Reality 4.1. Now, let's not be distracted or confused by the small increment number. We went from 4.0 to 4.1. This is a massive release. We have tons of new features and you'll be able to see the detailed list of those features in the new version of the Reality User's Guide. In this video, I'm going to focus on the top 10. And to do that, I'm gonna move between the Poser and DAZ Studio version of Reality. Both versions are exactly the same. They are exactly at the same point. They have the same features and they're going to be released exactly at the same time. So let's begin. Feature number 1, Reality 4.1 is based on Lux Render 1.5, which brings a slew of new features, new rendering modes, and for the first time Reality includes Lux Render in its own distribution. So once you install Reality 4.1, that's it. You don't need to install anything else. All you have there is what you need to start rendering fantastic images. Feature number 2 is speed, and to illustrate the point, let me show you this image. In here we have a very interesting series of components, of elements. We have a very reflective body and a surrounding environment which is reflected in the car's body, and multiple materials. We have glossy, we have metal, we have glass. Now, on top of that, we have an IBL light and 3 mesh lights. I started rendering this with the Reality 4 and Lux Render 1.3.1, which is everything based on the previous version, and I could have rendered this for a longer time. It probably needed a few more hours. We have 2.5 hours, which means 150 minutes, and there is still some noise in that portion of the glass in front of the headlight. This is a great image, but of course it takes some time. So now let's see how that is rendered using Reality 4.1 and Lux Render 1.5. And we have a stunning 20 minutes result for rendering an image that looks already clearer than the original. The noise in the glass pane is much less than in the 150-minute version. And that would be a fantastic result. It would be fantastic. For 150 minutes to 20, that's a dramatic improvement. But that's not all, because we have another option in Reality called Extra Boost. And with that, we get this result, a stunning 7 minutes for rendering the same image. And look at this, the colors are more saturated, the image is sharper. We have a stunning 21.42 factor of acceleration. So if in the past I told you that you would experience up to 10 times acceleration, I'm sorry, I misled you. It's 20 times. But that's not all, because up to now we have used the CPU for rendering. There is another option, and that is to use OpenCL. OpenCL is the technology that allows us to use the GPU for rendering. Now, unfortunately, on Macintosh that is not possible because the Macintosh OpenCL implementation is broken. Hopefully, Apple will fix it in a later update, but for now that is not an option. On Windows, on the other hand, we have excellent OpenCL support and we can render fantastic images with the GPU in a fraction of the time that it would take otherwise. So let me switch to DAZ Studio on Windows to give you a demonstration. This is a nice steampunk vehicle, it's a nice scene. Let's call Reality and see how we can render this using the GPU. In Reality, we actually have support for OpenCL directly. We'll come back to this panel in a minute. And the whole point is that we have the devices listed and we can just select render frame with that option and we'll switch from CPU to GPU rendering. And if you look at the bottom of the window of Lux Render, you'll see that in fact it lists one device. What that means is that right now we are using just the GPU. We are not using the CPU. By the way, the machine I'm using to render this is a 4-core Windows machine, and in 20 seconds we already have a usable image. Look at that. Except for some noise in the underbelly of this vehicle, the rest of the image is quite clear. And this is in 20 seconds, so in a couple of more minutes we are going to have a very sharp image using the GPU. Alright, let's go back to Reality and see what options we have there in that panel, which has been reworked quite a bit. So now Reality interfaces itself with OpenCL, so you can see a detailed list of all the OpenCL devices, and for each device, Reality also gives you if it's a CPU or a GPU device, so that there will be no doubt about what we are using. And there is even a detailed report on the level of OpenCL support for each platform. So we can see in this case that NVIDIA is supporting OpenCL up to version 1.1, while Intel is slightly ahead with 1.2. Alright, so this allows you to use all the options in rendering with Lux Render, CPU or GPU, and engage whatever device you need to have. Because this is OpenCL, we are not locked in with one specific vendor. We can use devices from NVIDIA, from AMD, and from other manufacturers. We can even have those devices at the same time in the machine, and they will be supported. Now, if we look at the image back in Lux Render, after a minute and a half about, much of the noise in the underbelly has been reduced. Another minute and it will be perfect. Now, GPU rendering is still something that is at its infancy. It's a very new technology, so there are limitations because these GPU cards don't have the same amount of memory that you have installed on your machine, but for many scenes, this will be a perfectly good option. And the good thing is that with Reality, you have both GPU and CPU rendering, and for the CPU rendering, you have fantastic acceleration. So if you have an Intel CPU, because this is based on Intel technology, if you have an Intel CPU, this kind of rendering is fantastic, and any CPU that was released in the last 5 years or so should be able to take advantage of this great technology. Moving on, let's see what happened in the material editor. The Reality material editor is designed to be at the same time powerful and simple to use. If you look at some other material editors and found yourself lost in this bewildering list of properties or noodles and nodes, well, that is perfectly understandable, and we designed the Reality material editor to avoid that kind of experience. In Reality, all materials have a type, and that means that when you're looking at something like glass or metal or velvet, you have only the properties that are pertinent, useful for that type of material. In Reality, using the material editor is in fact the key to get the most out of the program, because you'll get access to all the physics-based properties. Now, in Reality, we have 14 types of textures. So, for example, we have a texture of type solid color or image map or something like checkers or bricks or fractal noise. Normally, when you need to edit one of these textures, you click on the texture preview and it opens in the texture editor, because some of the most advanced textures have several parameters. But for something like a solid color or a file name or an image map, you just need to change a property. Most of the times when you need to change a color, you just need to set a new color. You want to basically click on the swatch and have the color picker pop up so you can select a new color. And that is exactly what happens in Reality 4.1. Similarly, when you're clicking on an image map texture, what you want to do is to basically point to another file. And again, that is exactly what happens now in Reality 4.1. We call this feature Direct Edit. Now, there are times when you want to do these kind of changes on multiple materials, and now we have that option. So you can select multiple materials, like in this case, I want to change the specular color for the fingernail and the toenail at the same time. So I'm selecting both materials, click on the specular color, select a new color, and now both of these materials have that color set at 56, 56, 56. We call this texture multi-edit, and this feature doesn't stop at very simple modifications like this. We have much more flexibility. So let's say, for example, that we look at all these materials of type skin, and we see that there is a blue cast mixed together with the basic image map, and well, we decided for any reason that we want to get rid of that. One thing we can do is to basically click on the texture, bring it to the texture editor, and change the texture type to image map, which will get rid of the blue cast and preserve the reference to the image map. Now, that is great, but I don't want to repeat that thing for every material in the list. So what I can do is to select all the materials in the list, all the materials of type skin, and then apply the same conversion, the same modification to each material. So I click on the texture, again I bring inside the texture editor and change it to image map. Now Reality will understand the semantics of that operation, not that you want to change that texture to be the same for all the materials selected, but it will understand the meaning, basically saying, well, you want to change all the textures, whatever this is applicable, to the type image map, and it will preserve the specific image map of each material. And of course, it works the other way around. Let's say that I have a bunch of materials that have image maps and I want to give them a certain color cast. I can select them all and then change the texture from image map to color math, and then change the color in the color math texture for all the selected materials to this green, for example. And this will give the green cast, and if we look at the preview for the face material, now Victoria looks like She-Hulk. So texture multi-edit, it's fantastic, but so far we've been confined inside one single object. What if we wanted to do the same across multiple objects? And so here we have a sphere and a cube and a cone, and let's say that we want to make edits of materials across objects and, for example, change the type of material. We couldn't do it before, we can now. We just select all the materials we want, even across objects, select the conversion to metal, and we are done. And then now we can continue and select our materials and change the properties like the gold preset and make it a very shiny gold. Again, across objects. Straightforward, very, very, very cool and very fast. But then what if we wanted to do the really complex texture edit that we saw before across objects? We can. We change this to glossy, select these materials and say, here, look, I don't want this solid color, I want something a little more complex. So I select color math, and then I can change the type of the texture in the first slot, select an image map, select a file on disk. We have this concrete texture. And again, we have applied this conversion, this edit across multiple objects. And then we can apply the finishing touch and select again all these materials and change the shade to this sandy color. And here we are done. We just applied edits to multiple textures across multiple objects. This will be already fantastic, but we didn't stop here. We can now apply presets to multiple materials across multiple objects. And so we can right-click on the selected materials across multiple objects and select Apply Universal Preset. And look what happened. We have a brand new category called Car Paint, filled with some fantastic presets. They all look great. They are perfect for rendering cars and motorcycles, but I'm sure you'll find some more applications. One of my favorite is called Drift Orange. So we apply it, and now we can render fast and furious. Speaking of speed, there are times when you have a figure inside your scene, and that figure is really not in front of the camera. It's kind of in the background, and so it makes no sense to use all the features for skin rendering in that case, because if the figure is like that, using SSS, subsurface scattering, will not help you at all. It will not be visible when it's so far away from the camera. So it would be the smart thing to do to disable SSS so that you can save some CPU power and have your result faster. Well, in that case, we have a new feature for you, and that is the one-click disabling or enabling of SSS for the skin material. In the past, you had to do some additional steps to disable SSS. You had to go through the Volumes tab. Now that is not necessary anymore. You can just select all your materials and simply click on the SSS checkbox. You will see the volume information completely go blank, and you can render at this point, and it will be rendering still a fantastically realistic skin material, but just without spending time for the volumes. So that is, again, one productivity feature, one other way to make your workflow easier and faster and more enjoyable. For the skin material, we have one new feature, and that is the custom coat channel. The coat channel is something that we had before in the glossy material, but it was not accessible for the skin material, which is a variant of the glossy material. And now we have it, and this opens up a whole series of new possibilities for creating really new skin tones. So what we can do is to simply enable the top coat and then create our texture that we want to associate to the coat. The coat is basically the glossy portion of the glossy material. Glossy material is a matte material with a glossy coat on top. So we can just decide how that glossy coat is colored, not the reflection, but the real color of the coat. And we see the material changing because we have this translucent coat on top, for which we can change the thickness, and a thicker coat will bring a darker result. So if we change it to 0.5 nanometers, for example, we will see that the material becomes darker, more saturated blue, but we can still see the pinkish hue of the skin underneath. This is a truly fantastic property that can be used in many different situations. For a Reality DAZ Studio Edition, we have an additional feature, which is the automatic conversion of iRay shaders. When Reality detects that we are using that kind of shaders, it will automatically try to do some special conversion, including trying to guess exactly what kind of material type that is. So if we select one of the objects in the scene here and we apply one of the presets, for example, here we are looking at some glass shader. So I can apply that shader, and Reality will detect, in fact, that is glass, and it will set its own material type to the right kind. Now, in reality, glass is one of the most sophisticated materials, and it has 4 variants. So we have architectural glass, we have standard glass, volumetric, and frosted. Now, we can see that this specific shader is being converted to standard glass. if we select the thin glass, will there be a difference? Is this a coincidence? Is this just a random or default value? Well, no, actually Reality does a specific conversion of the material. When we use the thin glass preset in Studio, then we get architectural glass in Reality. So this is one other way to get you up to speed in no time. But that is just the tip of the iceberg, because the goal for Reality 4.1 has been to convert the characters, eye-ray shaders, to be the most realistic possible. So anything that is derived from Genesis 3, like Victoria 7, is converted automatically to the best possible result, starting from the shaders that are applied in Studio. And so if we look at Victoria 7 now, we see that all the skin materials are set as skin, and they are just great. The specular map is in the right spot, and we have all the parameters, the glossiness set correctly, and we are using the new top coat channel of the skin material, and the results are great. In addition, we have support for both normal maps and bump maps at the same time in a material. And again, in this case, it has been converted automatically from the host shader, and the results are just fantastic. So to recap, we have up to 20 times CPU acceleration in rendering. We have GPU acceleration courtesy of OpenCL, which means we are not vendor locked. We can use video cards from different vendors, and Reality itself is interfacing OpenCL for complete integration and ease of use. LuxRender is now included in Reality. You install it, you're all done, you're ready to go. We have texture multi-edit, which means we have the ability to edit textures across objects or multiple textures inside the same object. We can apply presets to these selected textures. We can do all kinds of transformations, so your workflow is going to improve incredibly. We have direct editing of the color texture and the image maps, which means one-click editing, changing, done. We have new universal presets with beautiful car paint examples. We have the custom coat channel for the skin material, which opens up a whole new set of possibilities. And we have, for you Studio users, eye-ray shader conversion, both for simple materials and for complex skins like Victoria 7. One-click easy disabling, enabling of subsurface scattering, and finally the ability to have a normal map and a bump map simultaneously in one material. These are the top 10 features of Reality. There is a lot more. Please look at the Reality User's Guide for the detailed list of changes since version 4.0. This is Paolo Ciccone. Thank you very much for your attention. Happy rendering!